The train screeched to a halt under the blazing Montana sun, and Clara stepped down, clutching a single worn suitcase. Her heart raced, not with excitement but dread. She had come all this way believing a man loved her, that a groom waited to marry her and give her a home. Instead, laughter erupted from the platform. The groom, the man she'd written letters to for a year, stood with another woman on his arm, mocking her patched dress and calloused hands. "You thought I'd marry that?" he sneered, his words slicing through her chest like broken glass. Tears blurred the platform, but Clara didn't cry in front of them. She turned and walked toward the edge of town, her boots scraping dust over the tracks. She'd sold everything for the ticket, her mother's locket, her small farm tools, all for a promise that turned to shame. Each step away from the train felt heavier, like she carried her heartbreak on her shoulders. She whispered to herself, "Don't cry, Clara. Not here. Not for him." But the tears finally came when the town faded behind her. From the nearby corral, a cowboy saw her silhouette against the sinking sun. Luke Bennett was fixing a broken fence when he heard the train whistle and the laughter that followed. When he saw her, alone, trembling, wiping her eyes, something inside him shifted. He didn't know her story, but he recognized that kind of pain. It mirrored the one that had hollowed his own heart after losing his fiancée years ago. He dropped his tools and approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Ma'am," he said gently, tipping his hat, "you look like you've had a rough ride." She tried to smile, failing miserably. "I had a destination. Seems it didn't want me." Her voice cracked like thin ice. Luke studied her for a moment, the bruised hope in her eyes, the trembling of her hands, and something fierce stirred inside him. "Town's no place to be alone after sunset," he said. "Come on. There's coffee and a warm fire at my ranch." Clara hesitated. She'd trusted one man already and it had destroyed her. But the way he looked at her, not with pity, not desire, but quiet respect, made her chest ache in a different way. She nodded faintly. "Just for a while," she whispered. They walked side by side through the golden fields, the wind carrying the scent of sage and smoke. Each step away from the tracks felt like a step toward breathing again. At the ranch, Luke poured her coffee and let her sit by the fire without asking questions. He knew silence could heal better than words sometimes. She stared into the flames, her fingers wrapped around the warm mug. "He laughed at me," she murmured, as if confessing a secret. Luke's jaw tightened. "Then he wasn't a man worth your tears." His tone was soft but unyielding, the kind of truth spoken by someone who'd known betrayal too well. The next morning, Clara offered to help in the barn as repayment. She brushed the horses, fed the chickens, swept the porch. Luke watched from a distance, struck by how naturally she belonged there, not like a guest, but someone who fit into the rhythm of the land. "You don't owe me a thing," he told her. "I wasn't raised to take charity," she replied, wiping sweat from her brow. Her resilience reminded him of spring rain, quiet but strong enough to bring life back to dry soil. As days passed, laughter began to replace silence at the Bennett ranch. Clara cooked, fixed torn curtains, and even taught Luke's dog to fetch boots instead of rabbits. But one evening, when Luke rode into town for supplies, he overheard talk at the saloon. The groom, the same man who humiliated Clara, had returned, telling everyone he wanted her back now that his new bride had left him. Luke's blood boiled. He rode home under a storm-dark sky, a warning heavy on his lips. When he reached the ranch, lightning split the horizon, and there, standing by the porch in the rain, was the same groom. He was shouting Clara's name, his words slurred with drink and regret. Clara stood frozen by the door, torn between fear and fury. Luke dismounted, his boots splashing mud as he stepped forward. "You've got no right here," Luke said, voice low and sharp. The groom sneered, "Who are you to say that? She's mine." Clara's heart pounded as thunder roared above them. She looked at the man who broke her and the cowboy who'd quietly mended her. For the first time, she realized she didn't need rescuing, she'd already saved herself by leaving that train platform behind. But the night wasn't done testing her. The groom stepped closer, his hand curling around her arm, and Luke's patience snapped. Luke's fist connected before the groom could tighten his grip. The man stumbled backward into the mud, swearing as rain poured over them both. "You think you can steal what's mine?" he spat, wiping blood from his lip. Luke stepped closer, steady as a mountain. "She ain't something to steal. She's someone you threw away." His voice carried over the storm, raw and certain. Clara stood silent, trembling, not from fear this time, but from the power of being defended, not pitied. The groom sneered and lunged again, but Luke caught his collar and shoved him against the wagon wheel. You laughed at her when she came here, Luke said through clenched teeth. You made her believe she wasn't enough. Well, look at her now, she's stronger than you ever were. The man's rage melted into something weaker, shame. When Luke let go, he staggered backward, mumbling curses that drowned in the thunder. You'll regret this, he hissed before stumbling toward town, disappearing into the rain. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of the storm. Clara stared at Luke, rain dripping from her hair, her chest heaving. You didn't have to do that, she whispered. Yeah, he said softly, but I wanted to. His gaze held hers, steady and unguarded. For a long time, neither moved, only the storm spoke around them, washing away what was left of yesterday's pain. Then, finally, Clara exhaled. I think I've been waiting my whole life to meet someone who didn't laugh. The next morning dawned clear, the fields glittering with dew. Clara woke to the smell of fresh coffee and the sound of boots on the porch. Luke was already at work, mending the fence the storm had torn down. She brought him a cup, her hands brushing his briefly. You planning on fixing the whole world before breakfast? She teased. He smiled, that quiet, gentle smile she was beginning to crave. Just starting with what's mine to fix. She looked at him, her heart fluttering in ways she couldn't name. Days turned into weeks, and the ranch began to feel like something sacred, a place built from second chances. Clara's laughter filled the kitchen, and Luke found himself drawn to the sound like sunlight after years of winter. He taught her to ride his favorite mare, Willow, and she taught him to cook stew without burning the bread. Each day they built something invisible between them, not spoken, but understood. Something that felt dangerously close to love. One evening, Luke returned from town carrying a small box. Clara was setting the table when he walked in, dust and sunset clinging to his coat. You've been quiet all week, she said, smiling nervously. He nodded, voice low. Been thinking. He placed the box on the table. Inside was a simple silver ring, no diamonds, just a circle that caught the light like water. Clara froze, tears springing to her eyes before she could speak. Luke, he cut her off gently. Don't say yes if it's out of gratitude. Say it only if you're ready to stay. For a long heartbeat, she said nothing. Then she reached across the table, her hand trembling but sure. I thought I came here for a groom, she whispered. Turns out, I came here to find a man. Her voice broke on the last word, and Luke's throat tightened. He slid the ring onto her finger, and for the first time in years, he felt the world settle, like the land itself exhaled. The wedding was small, just the preacher, a few neighbors, and the wind dancing through the cottonwoods. Clara wore a white dress sewn from old linen and lace. When she walked down the aisle of wildflowers Luke had planted himself, there was no laughter this time, only quiet awe. She looked at him and saw the truth in his eyes. Forever wasn't promised by words, it was built by kindness, one day at a time. Later that evening, as the sun melted into gold, Luke wrapped his arms around her on the porch. You know, he murmured, when I first saw you step off that train, I didn't know what I was seeing. Clara smiled against his chest. And now, he kissed her hair softly. Now I know. I was watching my whole life begin. The wind rustled through the fields, carrying their laughter across the open land, the sound of two hearts finally at home.